What's happening, everybody? Welcome inside a weekend edition of the Tall Can Audio Podcast. Now with you here on a Saturday evening in the TCA studio, as it's kind of quiet around here. There's not a lot going on for sports, and I guess that's not fair. There's NBA Finals action going on, and I will check out some of it, but I probably don't have the full 3 hours of it in me. There's World Cup action going on, and I got some of that in me too, probably a little bit, but perhaps not. It's been on all day. The Jays have just finished losing. At this time of year, I kind of forget what Saturday nights look like without hockey and the CFL not yet in full swing. I've seen a lot of people taking a really disproportional number of hard runs at the CFL schedule here early on. And look, I'm not afraid to criticize the Canadian Football League when it's warranted, but two of their franchises are hosting FIFA World Cup games here for the next several weeks. It's put some pressure on them, which in turn put some pressure on the league. I'm not saying there is no criticism to be had, especially as it pertains to where some of these displaced games are going to take place. But it's really, really strange to see a cool thing happening in Canada that was obviously going to put some pressure on the CFL, and some of the lowest amongst us choosing that moment to blame the CFL for, I don't even know what the problem is supposed to be. Then the schedule is a little scattershot here early on, but I don't think there was a whole lot they could do about it. So anyway, that's not where we're going to spend our time here today. I wanted to give you a lay of the land for what you can expect here coming up this week, and I wanted to empty my own thought box here before things get a little crazy here over the next couple of days, and I fully expect that they will. So I thought I would check in with you here on a Saturday evening. A lot of you won't get to this until Sunday. Some of you Monday as well. So for you, you're in luck. This will serve as your Monday show because there won't be one this week. We'll get to that in just a second. If you're curious, I am sitting down tonight with one of our favorite breweries. This is from the Whippersnapper Brewing Company. This is the Cruise West Coast IPA. Had a chance on Friday afternoon to sit down for a beer or two with our friend Ian from Whippersnapper and have a little conversation with him. That was nice. So, as is often the case, he was kind enough to leave a couple beers behind. There was some newer ones that he left, and I'm going to save those for an occasion where I've got a guest here to talk a little beer with. But the Cruise, their West Coast IPA, always one that I enjoy, so I thought I would grab it and bring in here with me tonight. As for the Monday show, it will come either much later, Monday afternoon, or perhaps Tuesday morning. We'll see how this is all going to shake loose, but I did want to make sure it was out there that we will not be around for our standard Monday morning drop, which is unusual for us, and it's honestly something TCA takes pride in, is to be around on Monday. That's kind of our tent post, right? And we'll float through the week. You know, maybe it'll be a Wednesday, maybe it'll be a Thursday, whatever's going to work with a guest, but we try to be around on Monday, and it just didn't work this week, and there was no real reason to try and force it to work. For one thing, Rob is out of town once more this Sunday. He will be back next Monday morning. We will get that back on turn. He's been away the last 2 Sundays, which is typically when we record that Monday drop. I was away the week before, although we did get something out over the phone. We'll get back on turn here. But in terms of how anxious I wanted to be to go chasing around some of our guests, was sort of tied to the way that the schedule of events is going to play out here over the next couple of days. There's 2 days off here between Games 5 and Game 6 in the Stanley Cup Final, and Game 6 will be Sunday night. The White House card for the UFC, which I grant you, I understand not everybody listening to this is a big UFC fan, the spectacle of what this is all going to look like on the White House grounds was obviously going to be a story in sports this week. There's a couple other little things, just the way it was all shaking loose. Like, do you really want to bug our regular guests, who we lean on more and more during the summer, to come in on a Sunday afternoon with all of that still kind of out in front of us that was going to go immediately stale? Like, hey, what do you think of the Stanley Cup Final? Well, by the time you guys heard that on Monday morning, the final might be over, or it might be time to be teeing up a Game 7. So it just didn't make a whole lot of sense. Had Rob been around, we would have done our thing. He'd come in. He and I have been doing this long enough that we can find enough other things to talk about. And, we would have made something happen. But just the way his schedule shook loose in combination with the sporting schedule this week, it just didn't make sense to try and bug somebody else to come in here on a Sunday afternoon and fill a slot that was going to go immediately stale. So you're getting me now, and then you will hear from us again, like I said, either Monday afternoon or sometime on Tuesday when we have a better handle on everything that shook loose on Sunday night. Just kind of a weird scheduling quirk. I do want to give you a couple of thoughts on this UFC thing. We'll punt that to the end in case you're not interested. The place I want to start, and we're not going to spend a pile of time on this, is just, guys, I'm getting dangerously close to having to say some really mean things about the PWHL. As of 6 o'clock on Saturday evening, we have no idea what the draft order is for the PWHL entry draft. And that draft is on Wednesday. It's 4 days away. And perhaps it's less important that you and I know the order. It's incredibly important that the teams know the order. We're up to 12 teams now. Where should you be focusing on your attention? Are you going to be picking second? Are you going to be picking ninth? Are you going to be picking 12th? To some degree, you have to believe that the league standings are going to factor into this, right? They even have, I forget the name of it, they call it the gold plan. It's got a bunch of different names. After you're eliminated from the playoffs, if you were in the league this year, if you were one of those 8 teams and only 4 made the playoffs, you had the ability to win points towards drafting first overall, right? In theory, and I like this. I like that the PWHL does this. It's a system I've advocated for in other sports before. But if you're the first team eliminated from playoff contention, in theory, it's because you're the worst team in the league. And I don't want to just automatically hand you the first overall pick, especially in a year like this, when you're talking about your Abby Murphys coming in, your Layla Edwards coming in. Like, this is a monster draft, and this is why teams tank in other sports. So this system is supposed to be, in theory, you're the first team eliminated. You have the most time to rack up points. It incentivizes you to win out, which you're not good enough to do. But the more time you have to beat teams, to tie teams, or what I guess we don't tie in the PWHL, but get to overtime. The team that racks up the most points after they're eliminated from the playoffs gets the first overall pick. And I like it. It forces you to keep trying and not give up. Obviously, if you're, in this case, the 5th best team in the league who's going to miss out on like the last weekend of the season, you have almost no time to rack up those points. And so you won't end up near the top, in terms of getting first or second overall. So in a mathematical sense, I like it a lot. It's very logical. But what do you do when there are 4 new teams coming into the league who have again been given very generous, albeit confusing, expansion rules? How do you determine where those teams fit in? How do you determine what you want to do to the 8 teams that were already in the league, who went through this entire season, landed where they landed in the standings, and now are either going to be pushed down? Or the counter argument would be you should want your expansion teams to get early draft picks. You go all the way back to like 95 when the Raptors and the Grizzlies came into the NBA. The rules that were given to those expansion teams, and look, the NHL is another example. The rules that were given to the Blue Jackets and the Predators and, those sorts of teams when they're coming in and expanding, Minnesota, right around 2000, those were very harsh rules as well. And obviously we all saw what happens when you sweeten the pie a little bit. Vegas gets better players and they become instantly competitive. But in the NBA in 95, the league was so shitty to the Raptors and Grizzlies. Like, they were only allowed to spend to like 80% of the salary cap. And in the first 5 years or their first 3 years of existence, they weren't allowed to pick in the top 3, like no matter how bad they were. Like, they just got the shit kicked out of them, and that's why it took them so long to be any good, if they ever could. It buried the Grizzlies. So you want to have a happy medium. But in a league like the PWHL, where everyone is already so fired up that the expansion rules in terms of what these teams have been able to take off main rosters of already existing teams for 2 straight summers, do you want to turn around and tell those existing fans, by the way, those 4 teams have the top 4 picks in the draft, especially in a draft like this? Like I said, Layla Edwards and Abby Murphy are franchise-changing players. Carolyn Harvey. Like, these are monsters. Franchise players. So you're sitting here in Ottawa, you're sitting out there in Vancouver, you're sitting there in Boston, or New York has been just decimated, and they're the team that perhaps could least afford to be. We let these 4 teams gut your roster, and yeah, I know you finished out of the playoffs again and should have a high draft pick. We're also going to let all 4 of them draft in front of you and perhaps get Carolyn Harvey. No. Like, this is not going to work, and it makes me wonder, to bring me back to my original point, like, it is the picture of chaos that we are 4 days from the entry draft and nobody knows the draft order. What it does make me wonder is if all the teams do know the draft order, or at least the league higher-ups at the top of this pyramid, all owned by one company, one guy, knows the draft order. But we're not going to put it out right now because we know it's going to make all of our original fans furious again, and we don't want that news cycle to last for 4 days. I wonder if that's the case. It's pathetic either way. If you know it and you're hiding it, that's pathetic. That's a terrible way to treat your fan base, both for your 4 new teams and the 8 existing teams. If nobody knows it, if you haven't yet figured out what the order is going to be, that's even worse. It's pathetic in the ineptitude of the people running the league. You decided to go out and add 4 teams. You hadn't yet figured out how this was going to impact everybody else in the upcoming entry draft. It's on Wednesday, guys. Can you imagine any other professional sports team coming out on, let's say, Monday morning and saying, hey, we know our draft is now in 2 days. Here's the rules. Here's the draft order. This is embarrassing. And look, I know I've taken some shots at this league before, but it's always been in defense of the fans. Gutting original fan bases and really turning fans against each other in this Ottawa arena argument. It's been those sorts of things. But I have been a booster of this league. The reason we keep talking about it on this show is because I want it to work and I'm invested in it. I'm like anybody else. I'm going to games. I got merch. Doesn't mean I'm not going to criticize. Look, do you have any idea how much NHL merch I've bought over the years? Does it seem like I won't take a shot at them when they deserve it? No. If you're going to be out here, if you're going to be in the public sphere, if you're going to be pro sports, you're going to be judged on what you're doing. And what you're doing right now sucks. You look like a total gong show. So, I don't know. I might want to clean that up. And I know what the counter argument is. I've heard it enough times. I get people in my DMs telling me I'm being too hard on them. They're just trying to tear the Band-Aid off, and they'll slow down on expansion now. Yeah, fine. You have to tear the Band-Aid off smarter. I know I've brought this up. The draft is Wednesday. And nobody knows what that's going to look like? Or do you know and you're not telling us because you don't want us to be mad at you again? I don't really care which one of those it is. It can only be one of those two. I don't care which it is. It's brutal either way. Get your shit together, man. You want to be taken seriously? This is a bad look for this league right now. And I've seen people I respect, people I follow on social media, people I know who've been invested in this thing are literally going, fuck it, I'm out, throwing my hands up. Like, and it's hard to it's hard to stand up for the league right now. The last 2 months have been an unmitigated embarrassment. And look, maybe it will settle down now. Maybe they will rest at 12 franchises. And maybe this will all kind of build some momentum and it'll all come off fine and everyone will settle down. And you got 6 months. Not quite, but if they start the season again in November, 5 months for everybody to cool off. And then the social media stuff starts to trickle out and teams are reporting to training camps and, we got new uniforms and hey, we got our first look at Team Hamilton or Team San Jose. And everybody sort of starts to get fired up again. And you've done this. I've done this. Other teams that we love that flame out in embarrassing ways at the end of a season or a playoffs. Just me? No. By the time it's time to start up again, you're invested again. So maybe that's where we'll be in the fall. But first, you're going to have to remind Toronto fans that, by the way, Darryl Watts left for Detroit. Seattle, you've barely got your team out from under you. Hillary Knight left for Detroit. She was supposed to go to you, Vegas. Welcome to you, new fans. She didn't want to go to you, so there was some under-the-table dealings there to get her through Vegas to Detroit. This isn't just a ripping on Detroit. I'm saying people are suddenly going to wake up again in the fall and go, wait, what the fuck? Where's my favorite player? It's bad look. There seems to be some debate on whether Canada's first game in Toronto there at the World Cup on Friday was a good or bad look. And I guess the conversation comes in two different forms. One of them being Canada's performance itself on the pitch, and the second being, Canada's crowd and BMO Field and all of that. And I think you guys know I'm not properly qualified to break down Canada's play on the pitch. I'm barely qualified to use the term pitch. But the general sense from the soccer crowd seems to be that Canada played well enough to win and didn't. And while it's not a disaster, like we had our friend AJ Jackie back on here a week or so ago, and he had said that, the goal would be to get a tie at worst against Bosnia. Well, you did that. Get a win against Qatar, who's the worst team in the tournament, supposedly. Have your 4 points, be ready to rock going into the next round, because this would likely be enough to get you to the next round. And then see what happens against Switzerland, who's pretty good, but not a world power. And as long as those guys have already beaten Qatar and Bosnia, maybe they wouldn't really care about their last game of the group stage against Canada, because they knew they were moving on. Maybe you wouldn't get all of their top stars, and Canada would have a shot at kind of really getting up higher in the mix here as far as crossovers and where you're going to get situated in the next round. Well, none of that came to fruition other than the tie for Canada against Bosnia. And like I said, I guess we can stay there for a second. It did seem like Canada had some glorious opportunities, couple of balls being pulled off the goal line. There were moments certainly where it seemed like they were carrying play. Your experts would also tell you that Jonathan David was nowhere near good enough. Kyle Larin, I don't know whether it was the right decision to sit that guy, but he was the one who came off the bench and scored a goal for you. And certainly Canada's energy increased after those substitutions in the second half. So I don't know what that means for the lineup going into their second game out in Vancouver. But a lot of people seem to think Canada maybe deserved to win. Didn't get it. But you are still in position coming out of that game to have had the point. You got the draw. And let's see how this all shakes loose. But then on Saturday, Switzerland does not walk over Qatar. And this changes a lot of things, including your perspective on everybody. Is Switzerland as good as you think? Is Qatar as bad as you think? I don't know what that means for everybody. It certainly would mean, there's an argument to be made that you wanted a clear best and worst team in the group. For everybody to understand what this was very early on, you just go, yeah, Swiss are the best, Qatar's the worst, we go and beat them too, we've got our 4 points, and you move on. Well, now, first of all, Switzerland didn't get the 3 points they thought they were going to get out of Qatar, so any shot of them resting or them taking an easier lineup out in their last game against Canada is probably out the window if they're interested in winning the group. And for Canada, winning the group is now more reachable than it was because Switzerland didn't go get those 3 points. If you beat Qatar and Switzerland, you can win the group. And maybe Switzerland is more beatable than we thought. But it also means everybody's still in it. There is no delineation. This is obviously going to be a battle. It's going to be one of those crazy things at the end because now everybody's got 1 point, right? Everybody in the group's got a tie. I don't know what that's all, how this all shakes loose now. It looks like it's going to be chaos in the group. I'm sure Bosnia's feeling like they can take a run at the Swiss. Qatar would have some extra confidence now going, we can beat Canada. Who the fuck's Canada? They've never won a World Cup game. We'll see. As for the conversation around BMO and whether it was a good atmosphere or whether it was not a good enough stadium, look, there's criticism to be had when you have to build extra stands at each end and hospitality zones and whatever else because you're clearly the smallest stadium in the tournament. You know, those are reasonable concerns. Those are reasonable criticisms. But it seems to only be coming from within Canada. There's always going to be, when it's in North America, a little bit of European looking down their nose. You know, we don't have the classic we don't have a Wembley, we don't have Old Trafford, right? Like things like that. It's always going to be a little bit funky. But it seemed to be a lot of BC people who wanted all 3 games to end up in Vancouver and for Toronto to have none. And a little bit of the Toronto is going to suck no matter what. We always hate Toronto, so fuck them. But I've been gathering up a bunch of people that I'm following on social media who have come here from other parts of the world, from Asia, from South America, and who are nice enough, certainly also from Europe, to tweet in English for me. And they're touring around, and they're trying to catch the vibes in the United States and Canada. And I saw not nothing but a majority of positive feedback about how cool it is to be playing World Cup games in this smaller stadium where you're right on top of it, right? And that's what BMO is. Toronto Stadium for FIFA purposes. You're uptight, you're right on it. I don't know anybody who cares about this thing who hasn't watched the replay or that moment of Kyle Larin scoring Canada's first home goal in a men's World Cup and hearing that roar and went, nah, it's a shitty atmosphere. It wasn't.
Larin! Yeah! 1-1! Listen to Toronto! Canada level! And it's Kyle Larin off the bench to do the damage.
The Brits, the Europeans, the South Americans, all saying it came off as a really cool vibe. And yeah, is it a little thrown together? Yeah. Does it have to matter? No. I just think it's one of these things that we do where we criticize our own thing. And look, we're getting some extra love because we are being compared to the Americans, who, I'm sorry, everybody hates right now. And if you think watching a soccer game at BMO is going to be a worse experience than watching it at SoFi in Los Angeles or any other monstrosity of an NFL stadium, you're out of your mind. This was a purpose-built soccer-first stadium. Is it smaller? Yes. Will those other buildings in the United States be able to have a great time and great atmospheres if the crowd is right? Yes. And I do fully expect the crowds to be right in a lot of those stadiums. But in terms of the actual experience of being there, I was seeing a lot of positive reviews of people going, this is a soccer-first stadium in a World Cup that outside of the awesomeness that Mexico is bringing, doesn't have a lot of soccer-first stadiums involved. And we did see that, right? Thursday's Mexico opener looked incredible at Azteca. I can't remember now. Was it in Guadalajara that the South Koreans played later on? There's been some really fun videos of like these South Koreans just giving her in Mexico, partying up, celebrate. Like there was a great video. You may have seen it yourself, like making its way around of like Mexicans and South Koreans absolutely tuned up and singing and dancing along with Gangnam Style in Mexico. I believe it was in Guadalajara. It might have been Monterrey. I think it was Guad. That's awesome. That's what you want to see. Now, that's not a stadium thing necessarily, but that's cool. So I think this might be another one of those cases, as far as vibes go, that Canadians are punching down on Canada more than the rest of the world is. Because I think you're getting a bit of a glow up here in comparison to some of the U.S. stuff, which people are anxious to crap on right now, and I'm in no mood to stop them. Here on Saturday, we also saw the Jays drop one to the Yankees. It's not good. They left 10 men on, went 1 for 10 with runners in scoring position, and wasted a beauty of a game from Kevin Gausman. 7 innings pitched, 1 hit. It was a home run, but he was brilliant. 105 pitches, deepest he's been into a game this season, and you wasted it. There's been some criticism, as there always is, of John Schneider. I think it's probably reasonably warranted here today. In the 8th inning, you had an opportunity. You know, you're getting guys on. It's starting to go your way. It looks like you might have a big moment. You've got Ernie Clement up there bunting. Guy leads the fucking league in hits. What are you doing? Now, criticism also has to come down to Ernie not getting the bunt down. It was a brutal bunt attempt. He pops it up. Not good. But John Schneider's comments after the game about why it happened and what they were trying to accomplish, it all rang pretty hollow. That was not the time. And our buddy Nick Ashbourne pointed out online that this is why you don't bunt for 1 run and just hope to, just get one across and grind it out. Because the Yankees come up in the top of the 9th inning, 2-run home run. That's basically your ball game. I'm not going to dive too deep into it here today because I forgot to mention off the top. Later this week, we will also speak to our buddy Andrew Stoughton from the batflip.ca. It's been a month or so since we've talked to him. And we'll do more of a where are the Jays now, right? They're getting healthier. It was great to see Kirk come back on Friday and immediately look like himself. Okamoto's already got 2 dingers here this weekend against the Yankees. You love to see that. It looks like Shane Bieber isn't far off. But there's just these moments in a game like this where Gausman pitches like that, and you're just like, motherfucker, how do you piss that away? It's been really frustrating thus far. So, we'll see what happens on Sunday. It's Patrick Corbin pitching against the Yankees. I don't expect it to go well, but who knows? Like I said, we'll avoid the NHL here mostly. Although if you did want to hear a little hockey talk and you missed it, we had on the show, I believe it was Thursday morning, Graham Nichols was here. Either way, you'll find it at tallcanaudio.com or whatever app you're hearing me on right now. Lots of talk in there about the Dylan Larkin trade request, what, if anything, that means for Brady Tkachuk, for Connor Hellebuck, for Austin Matthews, and just the future of American stars in Canada, if anything. Are we asking the Red Wings to hold the line for the northern portion of North America right now? And like I said, there's no real reason to dive into the Stanley Cup final right now when Game 6 is going to go on Sunday night and render all of it pretty mute. Either we'll be setting up a Game 7 or the season will be over. And either way, we'll get into it there early in the week. Jordan Stahl certainly insinuating himself or inserting himself into the Conn Smythe conversation if Carolina is going to win it. I think it's pretty clear at this point if Vegas wins, it will be Mitch Marner, and justifiably so. There was a point earlier in the playoffs, maybe beginning of this round, towards the end of last round, where I was getting a little snarky, saying that a lot of the media were just locking this in because it would be the funniest possible outcome for them. And he hadn't been scoring much through the conference final. He'd had the great start for the first 2 rounds, had cooled off a little bit, and then blew up in, what was it, game 3? I can't even remember, where he had his monster game. And immediately, for me, cemented himself as the Conn Smythe winner, justifiably so, reasonably so, not in a ha-ha kind of way. He had locked that in if Vegas wins. If Carolina wins, it sure looks like now it would be Jordan Stahl. Scored 6 goals in 5 games already at 37 years old while being the shutdown guy. That's an incredible performance for him. I guess I can mention here the John Tortorella of it all. I just don't like the way he's talking about his goaltending. We've now watched piece of shit Carter Hart give up 4 goals in 5 straight games. And he was quite reasonably asked after the last one, Yeah, you're thinking about Aiden Hill. You got a goalie there on your bench, your backup, who has won a Stanley Cup before. That's the stupidest question I've ever heard. No, it's not. That's you being a shitty leader. That's you not being willing to face what's out in front of you. And I get it. To him, he'd be trying to send a message to Carter Hart. I am not wavering for a single second. You're my guy. I have confidence in you. And yet, while you're doing it, you're saying to your other guy, Aiden Hill, the idea of even considering playing you is the stupidest idea I've ever heard. Okay, thanks, coach. That was a big confidence booster over here. What if Carter Hart sprains an ankle in minute 1? The guy you're about to put in there, the coach has just admitted he thinks it's a stupid idea. Well, we're done. That's shitty leadership. That's shitty coaching. You have to find a better way to send that message. Instead of trying to slap around a media member, you have to find a way to say, Carter Hart is still our guy. We absolutely believe Aiden Hill can get it done, but we believe Carter Hart is the reason we've got here. Whatever. We're going to continue to ride him. Instead, you take an opportunity to punch down on your backup goalie. Well, this is why you wear out your welcome pretty fast, Torts. And it's not an unjustifiable... Look, the fact that he's saying, I haven't even considered it, also sends the message that you're not doing your job. This is the first goalie in NHL history to give up 4 goals in 5 straight games. And it hasn't crossed your mind that you should at least think about the other guy? Again, this is one of those only one of 2 things can be true situations. Either you have considered it, but chose to slap around a media member anyway to send a message for Carter Hart in support of him, or you're a fucking idiot who hasn't even begun to do his job in this moment of thinking about what needs to be considered. Even if you're not going to make the move, you have to have considered it. 4 goals, 5 straight games, not even thinking about it. Would never even consider changing him. Fuck you, man. Just a thoroughly unlikable coach. Always punching down on the media till he gets inevitably shit-canned again and needs a job back in the media. I cannot stand this guy. I don't understand the water carrying that gets done for him. And, if you actually get to know him, he likes dogs. Fuck off. Everybody likes dogs. Doesn't make you a good person or a good coach. Certainly doesn't mean you deserve a job again back on a fucking panel. Game 6, Sunday night. Last thing here. I texted our buddy Arden Zwelling of Sportsnet. Noticed he hadn't been around the Jays beat here for the last couple days and saw some of his work going up. The man is in Washington, D.C. to cover UFC Freedom 250. It's a great name. Sounds love. Look, this thing is bizarre. I can't imagine what non-fight fans think of this. Perhaps you're one of them. I'm a fight fan. I think the UFC at times, not at this time, but at times has gotten a bad rap for being savages and it's bare-knuckle fighting. They have legitimized themselves well. They have put themselves in the past in better situations to be policed by drug testing. They have really cleaned up their image, and there are a lot of people out there that just don't like the idea of combat sport. And that's fine. That's a perfectly reasonable stance to hold. And for those people, this would be an atrocity. An event like this taking place on the South Lawn of the White House. So I understand those people. I, as you guys know, even though I have to kind of hold my nose sometimes at the UFC, I am a fight fan. I like to see what these guys can do. And I also find this to be deeply bizarre. And maybe it's the fact that it's this White House and it's Dana White being friendly with Donald Trump and it's being done on his 80th birthday and it's everyone trying to pretend that this isn't some sort of propaganda. But it's so strange. They're doing the weigh-ins and the press conferences at the Lincoln Memorial. There's this monstrosity of like a rig that has to be put up. It's not just putting up an octagon in the middle of somebody's yard. Like, you guys have probably seen them. Maybe you've had them for your own kids, where you get those round trampolines. And when your kids are young, you're supposed to put that mesh up around it so they don't go bouncing off the side. It's not that. You need a full lighting rig. You need something like over the top, like a roof. You need lights coming down. You need all kinds of power going into this thing for broadcast capability. I'll post the picture on our social media of what some of this looks like. It is a freak show right beside the White House. And look, I get that this president and this administration has not been shy about desecrating the White House. It is no longer as taboo as it once was to build some crazy shit on that property. But this thing, and again, I keep coming back to this. I get why your average Joe would think this is weird. I'm a fight fan, and I agree. This is so weird. In a million years, you never would have convinced me that I would see a UFC octagon and a giant lighting rig and a broadcast position and all kinds of stuff being set up on the White House grounds. It's bizarre. And it's all to soothe one guy's ego. If you recall, this thing was supposed to be like right around July 4th, America's 250th birthday. Somehow it got bumped up a month. And now it's on somebody else's birthday. It's funny that, what we're all doing here. And look, I don't want to take away from this. I'm not going to get into the fight card itself tonight. It's a good card. There are some really interesting fights that are going to happen here. Really good fights. But it is so strange. And like, if you talk to people involved in combat sports, like, this is not a great, forget rain. Like, if it rains, that's really not good. You're trying to grab onto each other. You're trying not to, you slip even for a half second on someone's putting your lights out with a kick to the head or a punch in the jaw. And they've said they won't shut it down for rain. The only thing that's going to shut them down is lightning. They would have to wait. But Dana White has also commented that he was at the White House for dinner on a patio. I don't know what they call it now. It used to be the Rose Garden. I guess they paved over it. For some sort of dinner in May. And he said it was the gnats, the stuff flying around. Again, like, sometimes that shit sneaks up on you, right? Or surprises you. You're just sitting there at a campfire and something lands on your ear. You go, Jesus. You kind of swat at it. Imagine that while some 200-pound killer is standing across the ring from you getting ready to try and choke you out. And you're distracted for a moment. So these are fight logistics that are problematic and that are weird. But just the talk of it all. And so to circle all the way back, I texted our buddy Arden Zwelling here on Saturday morning. He's down there covering the thing for Sportsnet. I said, what does this look like, man? And he kind of said, like, it doesn't feel like fight week, which has a very significant feel in the fight world, right? The circus comes to town, and on Wednesday there's like press conferences, and on Friday there's weigh-ins, and then on Saturday the big show is like it kind of runs like clockwork. There's a routine to it and a kind of buzz around wherever the venue is. He said this doesn't feel anything like that. It feels in some ways like the Super Bowl, in the sense that it's bigger than the event itself. Like, fight fans can't get anywhere close to this stuff. Like, you're doing weigh-ins and shit at the Lincoln Memorial, and you're having the fight on the White House grounds. These are secure areas. You don't get to show up and yell that your favorite guy sucks, or, well, you probably wouldn't yell your favorite guy sucks. Your least favorite guy sucks, and whatever. I love you, Tapiria, and all these sorts of. It's not that kind of vibe. And as far as the media goes, it's not your typical Sportsnet or TSN or ESPN. It's not your MMA weekly or your, fight media. You're wrestling for elbow room with Fox News and CNN and the New York Times, who are here to cover this thing because it's a spectacle. They don't know the fighters. They don't know whether this is a good or a bad fight. They don't know whether this guy's the best or the worst in the world. They're here to cover it because some idiot decided UFC belongs on the White House lawn. And we'd better cover that because it's going to be a bit of a scene. And there's a little bit of that goes on around the Super Bowl, right? Like, it's obviously far more legitimate. To my knowledge, no one's ever tried to play that game at the White House. But it's not just ESPN and Telemundo or, other big Sky Sports out of Europe. When you get to the Super Bowl, your crazies come out of the woodwork. And not just your crazies, like your legitimate media, like your CNNs or your Fox News, legitimate as they are, MSNBC, and whatever else, your major networks, not just your sport networks, show up because now it's the big show. It is the Super Bowl, and we're going to also talk about the halftime show, and we're going to just talk about it like it's news instead of like it's sports news. And so everybody else starts to show up. And according to Arden, that's what this feels like. This does not feel like a fight week with that normal routine. This feels like a spectacle. And you're running into other media types who typically are covering congressional sessions or Senate debates. But now this thing has dropped into the Washington Monument. I guess we better cover this for a couple of days. Just deeply strange, bizarre. And that's without even getting into whether the fights will be any good and how the weather outside may or may not impact it. It's just so weird. So, I don't know. Maybe the Wall Street Journal's got a great piece up on UFC Freedom 250 or something. We will get into that early next week. I think our buddy Bunda's going to be back. We'll get into the hockey. We'll get into some CFL with him, and at the end of that, we'll talk about what this UFC White House spectacle looked like and how it came off. It goes down on Sunday night, and it was just one more reason to not really bother trying to put together a Monday morning show for this week. So we'll get into all of that early next week. Lots of great stuff coming up. Like I said, if you missed it, we talked some craft beer with Andy Nita from the Nita Beer Company on Friday morning. Before that, Graham Nichols from the Hockey News was here. All of it at tallcanaudio.com or on your favorite podcast app. Bunda early this week. We'll also talk to Stoughton this week. A couple other irons in the fire, and then Rob will be back next Monday, and we'll try and get back on. I was going to say back on track here for a while. You fuckers know. At some point in July is where I start to disappear again too. So we'll wrestle with all of that as it comes. But for a little while, we'll get back more on the normal train of the way things go around here. Until then, my name is Matt Robinson. Thanks so much for listening. Hope you all have a fantastic weekend. We'll talk to you early next week.